I'd like to thank Ambassador Hill again for chairing that panel, but in particular thank our guests from Israel. That was just terrific. Okay, our next panel has three people whom we could ask to come up and speak about anything, and I think all of us would be rapt. But this particular topic on this stage today is extraordinarily relevant. So you've met the two chancellors. They're going to come up. Chancellor Chop will lead a conversation between the governor and Chancellor Shockley about how Colorado will soon overcome Israel as the cyber superpower of the world. Just looking to see if anyone's paying attention. No, okay, they're not. So with that, we're going to start. I'm going to have all three come out, but needs no introduction. The state's entrepreneur-in-chief, John Hickenlooper, our governor.
So, I'm not going to get in the way of this discussion, so I'm really just going to take 60 seconds to thank all of you for being here, to give a special again, renewed shout out for our friends from Israel for coming from such a long distance and being willing to share their experiences and all their success with us. And to reaffirm that I look at this as kind of the first step. We're building a foundation, hopefully a foundation of a great bridge that will be able to connect Israel and the United States, and especially Israel and Colorado. And I think both countries are based on innovation, both countries. Both Colorado and Israel. Well, I'm the governor. I have to have a certain liberty in terms of ambition. But I think both Israel and Colorado really are based on innovation. They are hotbeds of startups in all kinds of industries. And I think cyber is that particular place right now where innovation is most precious and most needed, most critical. So. Thank again everyone from Israel for being here. Thanks again to the University of Denver for hosting us and pulling us all together, and the University of Colorado Springs for kind of being the catalyst to push Colorado so strongly in this direction. And I'll shut up and be part of the conversation.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Governor. It really is your vision that's leading us all forward here in Colorado. No, it really is. And we are all thankful for it. It's so important and urgent. And we just heard what change. Okay, so I didn't major in technology. Uh-oh. I need some help. Okay, let me start over. We are delighted to be here, and we appreciate your vision, Governor. You really are the one, I think, in Colorado that's bringing us all together, coalescing us, pushing us forward. So this is an international conference. We have these wonderful friends from Israel, Canada, people from across the state. Could you say a little more about your vision and in particular why you are thinking about creating a National Cyber Intelligence Center? So just describe what you want.
Just making sure. And I think I should recognize Canada too. I apologize for not for blurring over that connection as well. When we first recognized, and largely I think as a result of Spacecom in 2005 being given primary responsibility for cybersecurity connected to the military, that we had assets, and at this point I think there are over 80 different cyber companies in Colorado Springs. And as I began to kind of explore that over the last couple of years, and quite bluntly, I didn't fully understand. I've read the newspapers and I saw about Target or the large companies that have been hacked, but didn't fully understand the circumstances and the context within which that was happening and what the likely problems that we would encounter down the road if we didn't begin to act very quickly. I didn't get that. And so kind of simultaneously we saw that Colorado had all these assets and that there was a need that was to a large scale unrecognized by not all, but largely unrecognized by most governors, most mayors, most county commissioners. And I think that was our first, at least my wake-up call was, there's no place in this country where mayors, county commissioners, city council members, the people that need to understand cyber threats especially from an allocation of resources point of view. They don't have to be able to write code, but there's no place for them to go and learn get a sufficient context so that they can make decisions around the allocation of resources. So that was the first step, that we could have a center down in Colorado Springs. And obviously, as I recognize that there are some 20-some professors teaching some form of cybersecurity down at the University of Colorado Springs, it was one of the top universities already, that there should be some sort of a connection to that research and the business community that was already springing up around it. And right about that time was when we were doing a round-the-world trip, and economic development trip last fall. And so we made sure that the time we had in Israel, we carved off a whole day and some of the people that are here were very gracious with their time and came and presented to us and described a little bit of what you just heard about. And later in that day, the next day, we met with Prime Minister Netanyahu and discussed this idea of having a center in Colorado that would have a university, a research component, not just in the university, but primarily at that university, but connected to all the universities in the state and hopefully other universities as well, and trying to bring capital into play so that when research gets to a certain point, we can more rapidly, we can accelerate that transformation of the research into real action. And that, in this case, I think in many cases would be business activity. Prime Minister Netanyahu was very supportive of this. Since then, we've talked to a number of potential investors in Colorado. Would they be willing to put money together into some sort of a fund that would look to provide resources, not just for startups, but also for mezzanine companies, both in the United States and in Israel, and hopefully build that research between the two of them. And obviously, I'm happy to connect to bring Canada in on this as well, because it is such a daunting problem that the more minds and the more expertise we have at the table, the better. So, and then the third part was, I was talking to the CEO of Arrow Electronics, $20 billion a year company, $23 billion a year company, and asked him, well, if you get deeply hacked into the core of your intellectual property, where do you turn? And he was quite blunt. He says, our intellectual property is created by a number of different companies, and we integrated, and we don't have a place where we can comfortably turn, right? There's no federal place, or at least at this point, this was 8 months ago. Obviously, this is changing rapidly. But part of this notion is that this institute would be able to also have a rapid response center for, I think the greatest need is probably the middle-sized companies, where they could turn and really find support. And by having a rapid response center, we would know that we would always have the cutting-edge information. What are the latest hacks? What are the biggest innovations that the hackers are doing, that those people that want to do evil to us, what are their latest techniques? And ideally, we've talked to many of the CEOs of the CEOs or heads of technology of our largest companies in Colorado. So would you be willing to take your top information security official, or their chief information security official, and loan them or have them on a fellowship for, say, 3 months at this center once we got it up and going, so that they could kind of have a flow through of the top talent, and again, not just in Colorado, but from around the country, and hopefully from Israel and Canada as well. So that's the 3 legs of this center, is to have an institute that will train elected officials of all different levels, also have a rapid response center that functions almost like a collaborative, really funded by business and driven by business, but with a dotted line connecting it to state government and to the federal government, and making sure that is strong and independent. And then lastly, a really strong research center that has an accelerator for getting the research into action.
That's an amazing vision, and Chancellor,
It is an amazing vision.
Just so we're perfectly clear, 90% of that vision the Chancellor was already working on, and Mayor John Southers in Colorado Springs. So I love having it being delegated as my vision, but let's be perfectly blunt, that there's a lot of people working on this already.
That's absolutely true, but we like to give you all the credit we can. So seriously now, this is a big challenge. This is a phenomenal opportunity. Phenomenal threat. We just heard about change as a challenge, opportunity, threat. So how do you see higher ed going to fit into this? Ambassador Hill just mentioned that higher ed as an industry tends to be pretty siloed. We tend to reward individual faculty doing individual research. How is higher ed going to fit in? How is this going to change higher ed? And how do you see partnerships developing?
Right, I won't claim that this is going to change all of higher ed. But what I will claim is that we've got some people throughout this state and in all of the major universities at Boulder, Mines, CSU, Fort Collins, DU, all ready to work together to find some real opportunities for disruption in the research that we're doing, for innovation, and for collaboration on both training and educational opportunities. I'm convinced that we have a more collaborative climate that we give ourselves credit for, particularly when we are surrounding really complex problems that need our attention. And so I know, because I've had conversations with all of the presidents, including, of course, Chancellor Chop, that I'm with today, all of them are committed. We have people on all of the campuses who want to work in the initiative. We also, because, and it's true that we've been at this for a long time, because of SpaceCom, because of being in Colorado Springs, we have 4 degree programs, 1 undergrad, 2 masters, and a PhD, that were built over a decade with cyber in mind, with security assurance and homeland security components in those programs. And that's because of the geography of where we are and the need. So we know that along with that, we're going to have training partnerships, certification partnerships, and we already are building a strong ecosystem in the K through 12 system. Because I really agree that some of this has to go before it gets even to a university or a community college level. I think we can do it. I think there are some barriers to it, but if we wait for everything to be perfectly aligned, and many said that, we had that conversation yesterday, if we wait for it to be perfectly aligned, we will be way too slow. And so I think we do start. I think we have significant alignment and buy-in, and there is so much opportunity that this is not a fixed-sum game, and we have to stop treating that kind of lack of collaboration as a fixed-sum game, and I think we will. I'm optimistic.
How about partnerships with higher ed institutions outside the state?
Absolutely. We're the lead institution for what was created originally by the Army Reserve for 8 institutions near military installations throughout the country, all of whom have in their programs NSA and Homeland Security certification. Those institutions are already in place. We have been talking about what we could do with Israel. We certainly, because of Northern Command and other things in Colorado Springs, have continuing relationships with Canada. We are ready, but we have at least 8 already outside of the state.
Like you said, we're already building.
Yes,
we're
we are.
already collaborating. So let's go back to your trip to Israel. We had this phenomenal panel, and at the end of which we had an invitation to come next fall, and I get to be the first person. We've got housing already offered to us, so we're packing our bags.
Nobody offered me housing.
Hey. So I'd like to hear more about that trip. I was struck in the panel about the similarities and the differences between Israel and Colorado and the U.S. Can you tell a little more about the trip and what you see as those similarities and also some of the differences, including some of the challenges we may face in Colorado that Israel didn't face or could address easily?
Now I have to be thoughtful not to get myself in trouble. One always wants to praise one's friends, but not at risk of angering one's family, as it were. So we met with Dr. Matanya Eviator, is that his name? Sure. Who's so he runs the the Bureau of Cybersecurity, I think is the way it came back to me. And what he's doing, and is doing full time, is helping to integrate the government work, the academic work, and the business work at a level that's so far ahead of what we're doing in this country that it really was breathtaking. And it's not just his office that's doing this. The I mean, Israel's made that decision that they are going to take that integration, and Beersheba, I think, they're going to have the research, again, startup centers and incubators and accelerators, all in one community, similar to what we're talking about in Colorado Springs, but they're certainly further down the road and on a more, not quite having the same, let's put it this way, their business interests, their military interests, and their government interests work collaboratively better than what we do in the United States. And I'm not saying that to be critical of state government or federal government in this country or anything, but they are further down the road, and I think they offer a great deal of a number of lessons of what we should be doing and how we can improve what we're doing. And the very fact that the Prime Minister heard that I was working on cybersecurity, and his office reached out and said, we want the governor to come and sit down and have some time with Prime Minister Netanyahu, just one-on-one, just sitting around a table so we can hear exactly what you're doing and we can kind of describe what we've been doing. That doesn't happen every day, you know, in this country.
Very helpful. So what's the initial deliverable for the center? What's the kind of value added? Maybe you can both address that, and we'll make sure you're aligned here.
I have a building to renovate. The former TRW building on North Nevada, some of you will be familiar with that because of the work and the classified work that went on there a number of years ago, was gifted about 5 years ago to the university. So one of the things that we have is the land and the building that we are proud to bring to this effort. So my first deliverable is a renovation of that building to make it a really operating center. Although really the most important deliverable is not that. It's getting these academic programs together, getting some training started, and then looking at a business plan of how we roll that out for not only the public sector, but the private sector as well, and how certain kinds of trainings and reaching into the K through 12 system will work. That's my first deliverable, probably.
And I guess for the center itself, we're going to focus on this institute, which would be primarily for elected officials. Again, as I said, mayors, county commissioners, city council members, where there really is a dearth. And I've had this in my head for the last year. When I meet a city council member or a county commissioner, I ask them about their awareness of cyber risks and that environment. And it is, trust me, there is a tremendous need. And I think, famous last words, I think we'll get the allocation. I think the General Assembly is going to allocate $8 million to make sure we can get this building renovated and laid out rapidly. And by that I mean we start working on it this summer. I'd like to stand up the Institute if possible. I'd like to have the first class go through in November. Now that might be too ambitious. I'm constantly being told by my staff that, you know, these things take a little more time.
I think it's fine.
Yeah, well, exactly. I need more chancellors, you know, around me, or at least ambitious chancellors. So anyway, I think standing up that institute is the primary first deliverable that we can get and get a class through there that has. So I have the National Governors Association. I was chair of the National Governors Association last year, so we have a commitment from them of 6 or 8 governors. I've talked to the president of the National Association of County Officials. That's all the county commissioners, some 4,500 members, I think. So they're interested. Mayor Suthers and Mayor Hancock are both going to work on the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And I think, again, pretty much everyone I've talked to said, yeah, I mean, each one of those organizations has some cyber muscle that they have, but they don't really have a program along the lines of what we're talking about. And I think there's real value in mixing in this training, if you're going to do a 1-day or a 2-day training, to have mayors and county officials and city council members all in that same training, because I think they'll, in the process of if we do this well, and I think Manny gives a good example of, you know, as he was saying, not just from the intellect, but from the heart as well. If we do that properly, the friendly, in the restaurant business, all those years I was in the bar business, we called it friendly friction. If you design your restaurant so people bump up against each other, unlikely conversations start up and people begin exchanging information and building relationships that otherwise you wouldn't expect to. I think that's what this institute should, that's my, kind of my higher vision there, is that there's additional learning by breaking down the silos that often occur between different categories of elected officials.
Yeah, that would be a lot of kind of unanticipated just connections there. Could be helpful. So we've got lots of resources, lots of talent, incredible set of talent resources in this room today. What can we do to help you, Governor, to help you, Chancellor, and what can the broader community do? But especially, what can everybody in this room do?
So as the governor, I do have certain powers that I don't often use, but I do have the power to deputize. I think one of the great challenges with this is people read in the newspaper about one aspect or another, one incident, one breach, but they don't really tie them together and they don't understand how serious this is. And I think that one of the things, and we're working on this in the governor's office, of trying to think, what does a communications campaign, right, for lack of a better word, but how over a period of, you know, not just a couple months, but over a period of 12 months or 18 months, how do we begin to raise awareness? And the best way that ever happens is starting with a kind of a core base of people that do understand the complexity and the risk, and do have their own different networks. They're not all just from the same group of people. And I think this is a pretty good cross-section to start with that. So that's obviously one place. We're also going to have to raise money and to get this institute or this cybersecurity center off the ground rapidly. So I know that there are probably only half of you that really have those kinds of resources that can pull out your checkbook and write major checks. But I want to make sure that you don't eliminate yourselves from that opportunity. And then last, you know, ultimately we're going to be making requests of individuals in a variety of different contexts, either to come help us teach or help us with the curriculum or help organize all the business community around the Rapid Response Center. When you get asked, please say yes. Just say yes.
And I would say, even if we don't ask, except in a broad setting like this, if you have an idea or are interested, I think part of this should be messy. I think it should not be completely defined, and it is not at this point. And so be a part of helping with that. Yes, we have some core deliverables. We will execute. We will get them done. But it is also true that what we don't know can inform it. I am very much a fan of the notion of synchronous innovation, that innovation doesn't wait on one innovation to start another, but all of the collaborative and iterative processes of that. So a little bit of messy is fine. I've already talked with some of you in the room that I have not known previously and would love to have more conversation. We've got our folks here from Colorado Springs and others. We need to have just some discussion as well as the deliverables. And I think we can do both simultaneously.
Okay, thank you. Now we have just a couple of minutes for some questions or comments, suggestions. Yes, ma'am. Do you want to stand up so your voice can carry a little bit better? Thanks. No, it's too tight. Okay.
Hello, thank you. So I worked in all sections of government and industry, energy industry, and I'm actually spending a lot of time in the startup community right now. And one of the 10 teams, my team is one of 10 teams that's in the finals for the Go Code Challenge, where we could win $25,000 with the state, the contract, that whole bit. So my question to you, Governor, and correct me if I heard you wrong, why would that first class that you're sending through in the fall just be government, legislators, elected officials? Why couldn't we mix that with people from our startup community, students? Is there a rationale that I'm not hearing there?
You know, the only rationale is the limitations of my pea-sized brain. When we first envisioned it, we wanted to make sure that the cohort, the class size was relatively small, so we kind of envisioned it as through these different, because I do think that it's almost like a triage situation. There's such a lack of information around the issue that there a lot of people that we should get through this. But you're absolutely right. It'd probably help everybody involved if we focused on a couple of other categories, like people in the startup ecosystem or people, other people that were coming at this from a relatively uninformed. You obviously don't want to bring in people that already know a bunch about it, because then they're going to be bored in the early parts of the session. But that's a great suggestion.
There just seems to be such an opportunity for discussion.
Okay, just gonna, because
Yeah.
we have about 2 minutes left, one other question or comment. Yes, ma'am? You're gonna have to stand up, Reed.
Mentors and business owners in my second startup. My question is directed to the Israeli and lady. What if I was an inventor? What happens if I have something totally radical that does not even fit on the binary platform and translates the binary platform to physical lifestyle, for example? How does one, I'm not offended by the way, how does one, do you guys offer scholarships to possibly finish that up?
Okay, I'm gonna let you all answer that offline in 2 seconds, but think about coming with me to Israel. It sounds like we both need to visit. Okay. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Governor. We're honored that you are with us here, and we are thrilled with this vision. Thank you, Chancellor. You've got a lot of work ahead, but we are all here.
We
to help
all
you
have
with
a
the
lot of
Governor.
work
We do.
ahead.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome to the stage for our second round of the 5-minute Cybersecurity Snapshots, El Pomar Professor of Innovation and Security at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, Terry Bolt, and Assistant Professor of Computer Science at DU, Rinku Duri.
So I guess I'll just go ahead and start. So I'm Terry Bold from the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. I have an odd title, Innovation and Security. I actually came to UCCS to actually start a Bachelor of Innovation family of degrees. So in 2007, we launched a degree in cybersecurity as one of our Bachelor of Innovations. Now we have 19 different majors. We also have a master's degree in information assurance and a PhD in security with 40-some students. One of the questions I've already gotten from the audience was, how do you get in touch with some of our students if you want to hire them? Well, the real answer is you want to start early, because we have 7 graduating Bachelor of Innovation in Computer Securities. One is still a free agent. He's trying to decide between a couple of job offers. The rest are already bound to companies a year ago. We work with companies on team projects. We do penetration testing and stuff as part of our team projects. So if you're interested, contact me. We'll get going. So now I want to talk a little bit about my research. Okay. How slow is it? So I do work in a broad range of security, from things like authentication, machine learning, penetration, risk analysis. There's a broad range of things that we can consider security. I've been funded by NSF, the Department of Homeland Security, IARPA, SOCOM, Google, lots of companies. I've done about $16 million in security. My biggest focus has been on authentication, and now people are really starting to see authentication as sort of the key for a lot of things. So how do we decide who is the person of interest? We've done joint projects with Logic Central in Colorado Springs and NREL, which is ongoing, a proposal is pending. We have companies in Colorado Springs like X-ITE, which is doing a fingerprint on your credit card, so you can authenticate as you go to use your credit card. So there's some really cool technology going on in the authentication space in Colorado Springs. So if we think about the factors for security, authentication, we start with something you know, passwords, sort of passé, something you have, a credit card, a token, something hard. They're easy to use, but easier to forget. Something you are, biometrics, that's a lot of where I do my work. And then Dr. Chow will talk a little bit about sort of where you are, which is another kind of upcoming technology for the factor authentication. So if I think about something you are, the good thing is it's really hard to change, it's really hard to forget. But there's a problem with it. If we think about the biometric market space, we might have the security promise of biometrics tying us, our sensitive data to us. The problem is it's also used at the DMV, it can be used at the grocery, maybe for a school lunch program, maybe at the library or the gym, or for accessing an amusement park. All of those places are using the same token, your fingerprint, right? And if any of those get hacked, that same data, because it's not changeable, could be used to attack anything. And I've been giving talks on this since the early 2000s, that this is a looming problem. Last year, the problem finally hit when 5.6 million fingerprints of government officials were stolen. Anybody who has that data can impersonate at the fingerprint level any of those people, because that data can't be changed. It can't be revoked. So we've had millions or nearly 1 billion financial records, right, hacked since 2005. No one serious about security would use a token that can't be revoked, except for this one. They keep reusing it. Why are we accepting that? So part of my research has been looking at how do we solve that problem. We can't just hash biometrics. We can't use the traditional solutions because a single bit change in a string causes a complete change in the hash. So I can't solve biometrics the way we solve lots of other security problems. We have to find a new solution. We can't just solve it by throwing a hash at it. So if I want to use biometrics for identity, I have to start thinking about how am I going to do that? It's not enough. I can't send my fingerprint through the internet. For those of you who have an iPhone or a Samsung phone or whatever that has a fingerprint sensor, rest assured, your fingerprint cannot leave the device by design because they know that could wreak havoc in terms of what's going on. Right now, you're just authenticating to your device. So traditional biometrics have this nice identity problem, but they can't be revoked, like a password or a credit card. I actually consider them like a symmetric encryption. Whoever has the fingerprint can prove that they have the side, and the other side stores a copy of it, and that's problematic. And the last problem is only the person who has the hardware that has the fingerprint attached to it can really trust the match. Anyone else has sort of got to believe magically when the other side said, yes, your fingerprint showed up. So how can we solve that problem as well? And that's been part of my research. So if you think back to the 80s and 90s, many of you are old enough to remember that, my students don't, you have this problem that we couldn't make the internet work, and because symmetric encryption didn't solve our problems. And then came along the idea of public key infrastructure, RSA, and the idea of being able to do an exchange where I don't have to know everything about that. So a lot of my research work in the last 6 years in terms of biometrics has been for a lot of other projects, but the one I'm most excited about is this idea of what we call the biometric key infrastructure, or the BKI. We have developed technologies that work for fingerprint, for voice, for face, for iris, ways that will allow people to authenticate where they actually never share their biometric data. The only thing we store is a revocable token that they can use to prove that they are the same person tied to their biometrics. But if that data gets revoked, every different company has a different version. You just revoke it, issue a new one, and say, good, we're good. So that's a little bit about my technology. If you have questions, see me around, we'll chat.
Good morning, everyone. I am Rinku Diuri. I'm an assistant professor here in the Department of Computer Science. And my general research area is security and privacy. Recently, I've been working on privacy in clinical informatics and vehicular telematics, network security, and so on. So I would start with a highlight of our most recent work in electronic health infrastructures, and then end with just a brief summary of all the other ongoing projects we have here. Federated data queries those are part of electronic health record infrastructures, and what we've been trying here is to integrate medical records from multiple institutions that host such data, and we are collaborating with Answers Medical here. So the idea is that once all the health records have electronic versions, then population-based studies can be done by issuing queries to all of this data. But we want that dispersed records are somehow integrated together before such studies are done. And it has been observed that from anywhere from 5 to 35% overlap can exist in this data, so it is important that before such studies are performed, the data is linked together. Now, two technical challenges happen here. First is the data is inconsistent. So when we're looking at data across different parties, then someone can encode a name differently, someone can spell a name differently. So when we're linking the data, we cannot just simply go by the letters. Second technical challenge, of course, is the privacy here, which HIPAA regulations are not going to allow us to just take data from one source and take data from another source and just combine them together to create a unified or collate the entire medical record. Now, there are techniques using encryption, dates back to 10, 15 years back, where you can take all the data, encrypt it, and somehow compare them without knowing what is the underlying patient information. But if you just brute force apply all those techniques, then it'll probably take you up to 54 years to link two data sets with just 10,000 records on each side. This is a rough estimate. So we looked at this problem, we revisited the problem last year, and we used different techniques based on encryption and different optimization, parallelization, and so we came up with a technique that will allow you to link databases in 6.5 hours and with 1 million records in each of the sites. So we think this is a vast improvement. It basically not only advances, improves the timing, but also gives you a privacy-preserving method of linking all the data. Now, that is just one of the projects that we are doing here at DU. There are other pillars of projects also we have here, so I'll just briefly tell you a little bit about them. We are looking at privacy-supportive architectures. Basically, these are architectures that allow you to use, let's say, mobile applications, but in a privacy-preserving manner. So one could be, a typical question would be, can I get nearest points of interest without telling someone my location? And there are different ways of doing it. So we are looking at architectures that will help you get data that is accurate, not just any data. Vehicular data collections. Our students have demonstrated 2 years back that collection of driving habits data, something as simple as the speed at which you drive, could be used to figure out where you are headed to. So our students, the same group of students, also built devices which can do the same thing, which basically preserves the business purpose, but without violating privacy. We are looking at ALPR surveillance, okay, how many trackers are needed to actually keep track of a huge population on a large scale. Network configuration analytics, so we are looking at security hardening. How do you protect a network, but from a missions perspective? So how do you make a resilient network that is secure? So instead of just protecting nodes, we want to protect the business process that is undergoing through the use of a certain network. IoT for Dummies, this is basically a project where we are trying to put an umbrella of security on a novice home user who doesn't know much about security. So how do you design such devices, hardware and software, to basically facilitate something like that? And if you are interested in knowing more, there's my email address. Please do contact me. I'll be happy to provide more details. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome to the stage, at this time, the CSO of BlackBerry, Mr. Dave Kleidermacher.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, JB, for inviting me to come speak today, and for everybody else involved in setting up this fantastic event. It's an honor to be here. I'm a technology geek, and I love talking about authentication and mobile security and all these cool things. And by the way, anyone who wants to geek out with me, feel free to drop me an email sometime, davek@blackberry, because today I'm not really here to talk about technology. I'm here to talk about policy. And so we'll go through some of the key critical issues in cybersecurity policy. But first, to start out, a quick, in terms of my background, you can read my background in the handouts. But one of the things I do at BlackBerry, I oversee product security strategy, and I have a team called CHASE, which is the Center for High Assurance Computing Excellence. And I want to bring that up because you hear a lot today about public-private partnership, and CHASE is all about that issue. It's how do we work together, both in technology and policy, to raise the bar on cybersecurity in the world. And so we are doing things like, we have projects with Oxford University, Informal Methods, building software that's provably secure. We have a project that we're talking to the National Cyber Bureau in the Prime Minister's office on mobile security. We have work, obviously, with Canada, United States. There's government, there's academic, there's lots of these partnerships. And so anybody who has an interesting problem they want to talk about and work on, then CHASE is a way to make that happen. I want to give you just a quick review of BlackBerry today. I'll spend just a minute on that. Most people in the world today think of BlackBerry as a device company, obviously. Mobile devices, BlackBerry had built its reputation as a device company. A couple of years ago, a little over 2 years ago, CEO John Chen was brought in to rebuild the company, transform the company. And I've been there for a little over a year now. I'm one of the executive team brought in to help with this transformation. Today, BlackBerry is a completely different company. We make devices, but that's not the focus of the company. And most people don't realize that the success that BlackBerry enjoyed, a lot of people think of the device and crackberries and people liking their BlackBerries. But the reason why businesses liked BlackBerry had nothing really to do with the device itself, specifically, other than it was an enabler of enabling businesses to mobilize, to enable our workforces to get their jobs done more productively while using mobile devices. And administrators and security administrators would use the BlackBerry software to make that happen. So EMM, Enterprise Mobility Management, collaborative communications software. And today, that's really what BlackBerry is all about. It's enterprise mobility, enabling businesses to mobilize their workforces. And that means cross-platform. So we're supporting iOS, Android, Windows, OS X, and so forth. It's cross-platform through and through. And how are we doing financially? Well, over the past 8 consecutive quarters, we've had positive free cash flow, 6 consecutive quarters of double-digit revenue growth in our software business. So that really is the focus, is cross-platform software, and that transformation is going very, very well. We have had actually about a half dozen acquisitions over the past couple of years, and I just wanted to mention one of them, because we have folks from Israel here today. We acquired a company called Watchdogs, which I'll mention a little bit later, is a cybersecurity startup in Israel, and so now we have an R&D division in Israel as well. And one of the themes we're going to talk about today is the sore spots for assurance, coordinating in the area of cybersecurity, and we'll talk a little bit about the encryption debate. And it's tough in 20 minutes to go through everything in policy, so I've narrowed to these 3 things. And there'll be a common theme that you'll see, and that theme is really that we need more international cooperation and collaboration. There is tremendous need for collaboration, information sharing, cooperative research in local governments, national governments, and they have, obviously, the mission to do those things. What we really lack is international regulations. There's no real driving force to make that happen internationally, and that's what we need more of. If you think about why, it's pretty obvious. Cybersecurity is not a local problem. Organizations are all, companies are multinational. BlackBerry is obviously a multinational company. Most cybersecurity companies, even the startup companies, are selling their products all over the world. Hackers are not local, right? Hackers are hacking us from all over the world. So cybersecurity is an international problem. Why aren't we approaching it more from an international basis? Another problem we have in the US specifically, like it or not, some international folks don't really want to share with us. That's a problem. We have to work on it and improve that. But again, if we can build that international collaboration, we can improve that. And overall, if we can work together internationally, we'll have a rising tide to lift all boats. That really is what we need to do. So let's dive into a few of these key themes. Assurance. This is really something I've been very passionate about my entire career. The problem we have today in cybersecurity is we have a crisis of confidence. If you were to go out there to the street and grab 10 random people and ask them, how confident are you that your digital identity, that your personal information, that your banking information is protected by the various organizations that are selected that they select to manage that stuff? How confident are they that now that Target was hacked, like that they won't get hacked again? Like they've made all the changes needed to not get hacked again, or Sony, or anybody else. I think you'll find that the confidence is relatively low. It's almost like we've become rather numb to the hacks. It's almost like, we can't really do better. We're going to get hacked. In fact, a couple of comments we heard earlier today, I think, are maybe a little bit of an example of how we need to turn the tide and how we think about this. You hear a lot about reactive approaches, detection. We know we're going to get hacked. Let's accept that. So what can we do to make that better? And while that's true, I completely agree that we need a holistic approach, prevention, detection, all that. We cannot give up on prevention. We cannot give up on the premise that we have to do better to raise the bar to keep the bad guys out. And so in assurance, the whole idea of assurance is what can we do to reverse that crisis of confidence? How can we gain the assurance that we need? And I think if you look at the past year, so the past couple of years, last year in 2015, healthcare, 8 of the 10 worst data breaches in healthcare history happened last year. This year, you've all read the news on ransomware attacks. It's pretty scary what's going on here. This situation's not getting better, it's getting worse. And so this is the key focus that we all need to work together on. Information assurance, security assurance. And so what is assurance? It's how do we gain more confidence in a scientific manner. Let's look at, as an example, a contrast, which is the safety critical medical device market. In the 1800s, there were these unscrupulous salespeople that sold snake oil. They'd go out there and say, this snake oil could solve all of your health care problems. It would cure all your ills, and people would buy it. Now today, if someone said, I have snake oil, I'm going to go sell this on the market, it's going to cure all your health care problems, why can't they get away with that today? Anybody have a guess about why they can't really do that today? Regulation, but at a higher level, we have a system in place for protecting against these really kind of like these assertions that can't be defended against. We have confidence. Now, you could argue that with FDA and other organizations, it's not perfect, but we have a higher level of confidence today that when a medical company says, I have this thing that does something, that provides a health benefit, that we have some confidence in that. We have a system in place, regulation, it's also evaluation, it's testing, things like that that give us that confidence. In the world of cybersecurity, anyone can say anything they want about how good their security is, and it could be complete lies, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It happens all the time. You can say whatever you want. My system is perfectly secure, and the reality of it is, you'll get away with saying that. Now, there might be some repercussions in marketing or whatever, but it's not, people can do that, and they do it. We need a scientific approach to assurance to prevent these kinds of things. Now, in the governments of the world, there have been some really, some pretty, lots of investment and attempts to make this better. So, for example, I worked on a project to assure software in the Joint Strike Fighter. The operating system I worked on for about a decade flies all of the computers on that Joint Strike Fighter. And it needed a very, very high level of security, the highest level of software security ever certified under International Common Criteria standard in the world today. And that happened in 2008, and nothing higher since. The problem is it took 6 years to do it, and we never changed a line of code. It took 6 years to get the certification. It's a lot of money spent, and we didn't actually improve the product. The product was actually really good already. And so what happened was the US government kind of reversed from that and said, you know what, that's too expensive to go high assurance. Maybe we'll go lower assurance. We had a bunch of programs today. We spend a lot of money and we get a relatively low level of confidence. And so there's a happy medium in there where we can get a meaningful higher level of assurance with a reasonable cost. I believe that, but we don't have that today. We need to do that. You might have heard iMessage vulnerability recently. So folks from Johns Hopkins University, iMessage, a lot of people think that the more you use a product, the more confidence you can have that it's secure. That's just not true. It might be true in medical devices, like every time you use a medical device, you get clinical assurance, but not true in security. So how many trillions of messages have been pushed through iMessage with I don't know, hundreds of millions of users? Johns Hopkins researcher said, I think that there's some design flaws there. I got to see if I can attack this. They tried to attack it and found major vulnerabilities in it. So the problem is, iMessage was never independently assessed and assured by any standard, by any independent group of cybersecurity experts. That's what we need, that independent assessment. So the bottom thing here, go back to that last slide, the last statement, we can't hope to raise the cybersecurity bar. We all talk about all the techniques and processes in place and partnerships in place to improve security. We can't raise the bar if we don't know how to measure its height. We have to know how to measure its height. And if you look at levels of assurance, this is a simplification, but on the left you have asset value. If the asset value is really high, life, critical infrastructure, high value finances, these are examples of high asset value where if it's lost or stolen or removed or whatever, you have a high consequence of that. And you relate that to the attack potential. Do we need to protect against nation states, organized crime? What level of attack potential sophistication do we need to protect against? If you put those two together, that gives you the cross product for where you need assurance to be higher. And as I said, in this area, we have that cross-section between high-value resources and a potentially high threat attack potential. We need higher assurance, and we don't have anything in there today. We really don't. So we need a scientific approach. We need it to be efficient in cost and time. We need to continuously improve. Threats are constantly changing. Techniques are constantly changing. And it has to be open and inclusive. We need to have all stakeholders involved, and it has to be international. As an example, I've been working on a new initiative called DTSec. It's a standard for evaluating security of medical devices. Why medical devices? Well, I just happen to know some people in the field, and we just picked that to go after. But I believe we're trying to demonstrate the way this can be done with the right kind of public-private partnership. We have government regulators, we have cybersecurity experts, we have medical manufacturers, we have physicians, representatives, patients, you name it, we pretty much have representation involved in creating the standard. But what it is that's critical is how do you actually evaluate that device to know, as patients, that we should have confidence that it will actually protect against remote hackers trying to get in and pump my body full of insulin and kill me. That's what we need to do. And there are many things, you can go read about it, and I'm happy to talk more about it offline, but there's a lot of things that have been put into this effort to make it cost-effective, scalable, always changing to meet those other goals up top. And so I encourage anyone who's interested in this topic to research this and to look at this as an example of how we need to work together to improve assurance across all products, not just devices, across national infrastructure, across apps, anything. Another key area is in information sharing. We've heard a lot about that already today. Three of the big areas in information sharing and coordination in security are threat. We need to be able to share very efficiently threat information. That's real time sometimes. Real time, like there's an attack going on now from this IP address. I need to know exactly what's going on. We need to share that quickly. But also strategic threat information. What are the emerging threats and techniques? So threat information sharing. Incident response, obviously, incident response is huge, and quickly making sure that we're working together to respond properly to threats, to actual attacks that happen. And then responsible disclosure is another really interesting one. There's this tension right now where some of the folks doing the best work in finding vulnerabilities are cybersecurity researchers. Cybersecurity researchers make the names for themselves and for their companies and organizations by publishing their research. And of course, if you publish a vulnerability before it's been addressed, then the hackers now have a blueprint on how to hack you. So there's this intense tension right now between what's the right way to disclose vulnerabilities as they're found and to disclose it to the people who can do something about it before maybe it's exposed to the public. And this is so there's some information sharing coordination going on, but in general, if you look at the world at large, there aren't consistent policies for managing that. We need that to be consistent. And again, internationally consistent would be good. There's lots of details here. There's things with Wassenaar Agreement that cause some problems with information sharing. Google has a 30-day. Some of you follow Android. With our Priv device, we've been patching every 30 days. We're leading the Android world in our patch frequency and speed. That's really cool. But CERT says 45 days. And other nations probably say other things. And you probably heard the debate between Microsoft and Google fighting a little bit about some vulnerabilities that were published, maybe before some folks thought it was time. This is the kind of thing we need to coordinate better on, and maybe have an international organization, kind of an international arbiter for making these decisions. So they're not made, right now they're really ad hoc decisions that are being made. So international entity funded by friendly nations who share a common purpose, lots of the folks in this room, supported by national policies. So the governments have an important role in all this, but it's not necessarily to run the organization. DHS has offered to manage an information sharing program on behalf of the United States, great. But regardless of who's actually managing and doing it, whether it's a nonprofit or it's an organization, it has to be supported, obviously, by local and national policies. Everybody should be free to join. Researchers, international researchers, vendors should all be free to join. And we have to remove, there's just a number of these barriers to sharing. There's a lack of trust. There's a lot of different problems. We have to remove those barriers. Colorado is a member of an organization that is called an ISAC, Information Sharing Analysis Center. And that's a great initiative in the US. Unfortunately, most countries don't have ISACs. The US is actually one of the leaders in having these ISACs. They cover different government organizations. They also cover different vertical markets. So there's a healthcare, there's a national infrastructure ISAC. And so that's really great. But again, those ISACs, who's going to create the international ISAC? Who's going to do that? Whose job is it to do that? Well, maybe it's the UN. I actually recently read online there's going to be a UN presentation at a conference for an organization called FIRST. FIRST is a really interesting organization, FIRST.org, that is a nonprofit organization that is about information sharing, especially around threat response and incident response. And maybe the UN is an organization. I don't know if they're the right organization, but we need an international approach to this, I believe. There's a quote here from the Obama administration. This is relating to the recent problems with the Wassenaar Agreement, in case you haven't heard of it. The Wassenaar Agreement, the way it was written, kind of like discourages researchers from sharing some of their techniques and tools that they use and not exporting them. Well, I think we're in good shape because there was basically a huge revolution amongst the researcher community saying we can't interpret the rules this way. And so, and the Obama administration agreed with that quote, which is nice. So I think we're okay. But bottom line is we need more international coordination around threat, around response, and around disclosure. Okay, the encryption debate. So this is obviously on the minds of a lot of people. It's in the news almost every day. The Apple versus FBI thing being the most recent, but certainly not the only one. And I think the big problem here, and it's an enormous problem, is that you have sort of the privacy advocates and some of the technology companies like Apple who are taking a pretty one-sided approach to this, saying it's our way or the highway. It's going to be done one way. Privacy 100%, and we're never going to share any information, and you're going to have to prove it. And it is a very, very one-sided approach. And in the government side, you also have a lot of one-sided kinds of comments, like we're going to assess, we're going to have some legislation that opens up potential backdoors and removes encryption. And I think that we really need, if there's one theme, not just in my talk here, but in this conference, around this area of collaboration and working together, we need to have a more productive conversation about this topic. Does anybody agree with me that we need to have a more positive and productive conversation about it? I think so, a lot of hands. And I think where we need to start that conversation is understanding the facts. There are some really important facts I think a lot of people in high places might not necessarily have a complete picture of. And I think we need to get those facts straight. That understanding, that base understanding has to be there. For example, so on the priv, if you turn on, well actually data encryption is turned on by default. So it's already on. But if this was to get stolen by someone, and they were trying to hack into my device, they wouldn't be able to get in because of the encryption. Now, the way this is set up, BlackBerry doesn't have the keys. So so if the government comes to me and says, can you please unlock that person's device, BlackBerry can't comply, can't provide the encryption keys. We don't have them. That's a trend. A trend is less ownership of encryption in the private sector, and giving giving users more control of their encryption. And so but let's say I was mandated, let's say BlackBerry was told, you must put a backdoor into that encryption. Guess what the criminals are going to do? They're going to run an application that has their own encryption that makes that irrelevant. They're going to store their information in an app that has its own encryption with their own keys. And then all that work I've done to put in whatever technology thing that was requested will be completely irrelevant. The bottom line is encryption, it's math is a truth of the world. And encryption is out there, and people can use it in any way they want. And smart criminals, maybe eventually the dumber criminals, but the smart criminals will use an end-to-end encryption that no one has the keys to, whether we like that or not. The other thing is, when people go to Apple or BlackBerry or any other technology provider and say, can you share X, whatever that X might be? Some people don't like to realize that technology providers are entrusted with a lot of subjectivity here to make those decisions. For example, iCloud is protected by keys that are owned by Apple. If the government went to Apple and said, give me the root key that controls all of the encryption for all of iCloud, they could do that, and Apple has to make a decision. Even if it's under a subpoena with a court order, is that a right thing to do, right? Now, I don't think that would ever happen, but the point is that requests come in and technology providers have to make decisions on what to do about those requests. There's a subjectivity element that most people don't like to think is there, but it's there. It has to be there. It's especially troubling. It's a big problem for the large cloud providers. BlackBerry's actually lucky. We don't store cloud information. We don't have huge amounts of private data in our infrastructure. But iCloud and Facebook and all these large cloud providers, they have all this data, and people can come request it. That's a huge burden for them, and it's very expensive. Everyone has to realize that responding to, processing the request, considering what to do about it, is a huge burden on technology providers. IoT, we've heard Internet of Things. I believe over time, Internet of Things will generate much more private information. So people need to understand that and be prepared both from a policy perspective and also maybe realize that you're going to have to accept some lesser amount of privacy given that we're wearing all these sensors. People have to be really careful about the stuff they're attaching to their bodies and using for healthcare and where that information is being generated, where it's being stored. A lot of the consumer electronics aren't governed by HIPAA rules. So if you're using it for healthcare, that's not under HIPAA. So more and more the IoT is going to cause this problem to be exacerbated, which is why we need to work together now to improve the situation. Ultimately, data owners will have more control over security. That's where we need to go. The watchdogs, I mentioned watchdogs. What's really cool about watchdogs, this company that BlackBerry acquired is now our file sync share solution for BlackBerry, is if I want to share, so imagine a professor wants to share a sensitive document with another professor in a different university. It's leaving your enterprise, going to another enterprise. You can assign the encryption and access control to the file so that even if it goes outside and it gets shared all over the world, you can revoke access and you can control the encryption regardless of where it goes. That's very different from most file sharing. The key difference is the owner of the data controls the encryption, controls the security. That is a trend that will continue, that has to continue. If we do the right thing, if we improve security, if we improve the assurance, if we raise the bar, it starts to enable things. Not only does it protect the basic things we're doing today, our national infrastructure, or our private information, it enables new use cases that are really exciting. In the world today, there are hundreds of millions of diabetics who cannot take a smartphone and use it to manage their insulin delivery. It's not allowed because we don't trust these things. Why don't we trust these things? It's a combination of technology and policy. One of the things that my Chase group is working on is this concept of smartphone as a medical device. It's one simple example of what we need to do to raise the bar. We're working on DTSec. It's the standard for evaluating security, so I can convince not just FDA, but all the consumers, regulators, medical device manufacturers that we can actually do that, and then having the standards, the policies that say, yes, if you follow this, then we will allow that to happen. And so it's a very exciting time. This is just one of many, many examples of the new and emerging use cases that are enabled by raising the bar. So to sum up, we need more international collaboration, coordination. That's not to say that local government, national governments have an incredibly important role, but they need to also connect more to the international governments and create these collaborations, whether it's an international government organization, a collaboration of governments, or whether it's international nonprofit organizations. We need to do that. And if we do that, and we raise the bar on these areas that I mentioned, I think we can turn the tide. Right now, people don't believe we can actually turn the tide. It's a war. It's good versus evil. It simply is. And I don't think we're winning that war today. I think we can win the war, but we have to raise the bar. And I'm out of time. Sorry. I guess we don't have time for questions, or I don't know if we do. Quick question? Anybody, questions? Yes.
So BlackBerry controls the operating system. It doesn't matter what you're doing with the encryption. You have access to it. Even if the adversaries infiltrate applications with their own keys, you control the operating system.
Yes and no. So obviously the operating system has, so the question is, if you have the operating system, they implement app security, then they can still get in through the operating system. There are certainly, that's true in some cases, and the operating system bears a higher burden, for sure, and you're right. And we need to hold the operating system more accountable, true. However, if I lose my device and it's off, I just have bits. And I'm trying to reverse the encryption off of those bits. If my encryption is from an application, those bits are just as good as the bits in the operating system. So that's one example of where, and that is probably the key example of where people will just find their own way to get around any other systems in place. Dave K at BlackBerry is my email. I'm pretty good at responding to that. I welcome any discussions, whether they are geek outs or talk about any of this policy stuff. Love to talk about it. Thanks again for having me at this conference. Appreciate it. Thank you.
At this time, please help me welcome to the stage for our final segment of the 5-minute snapshots, Executive Director of Privacy Foundation at DU, John Soma, Computer Science Professor at UCCS, Mr. Edward Chow, PhD student at UCCS, Mr. Jason Upchurch, and finally, Professor and Coordinator of Information Assurance Programs at Regis University, Dr. Qiu Jiang.
I guess we can begin. Thank you all for staying and not grabbing a lunch and hiding someplace. But the four of us have some interesting perspectives that I hope will add to this excellent proceeding we've had. From my perspective, being a lawyer, I always like to start with the important things, which are death and taxes. And, you know, that's what lawyers like to do. We always like to stop deals, forget the technology dreamers, let alone the business people like Steve Jobs. No, it won't work because it's illegal. Well, I must say that although taxes are here and alive, they always have been, because you can't do an economic transaction without taxes. That's just given. But now there's a new kid on the block. It's called privacy. It's been growing for the last 20 or 30 years, and recently, as we all know, Snowden got us started on the NSA, the security world, Target and Home Depot. I'm sure you can all smile at lunch, how somebody like Target, as we heard from the Israelis, how can you have a company named Target? And then have your HVAC people in Ohio have access to the mother lode of data. But it's there. People are alive with that, as well as Home Depot. Then we have, of course, the most recent one, Apple saying, we really like privacy and security, and of course the Department of Justice taking a different view. That's the background. And so privacy has jumped, and in the last 2-3 years, we're seeing in effect that privacy really is a player. It's the new kid on the block. And so as you all are working on various aspects of cybersecurity, privacy will be a player because there are always people involved. As a quick aside, I started law school in 1970. By the mid-'80s, we had 50% women in our classes, and in the last 5-7 years coming through the law school, I suspect B school as well, is ladies, you can smile that are here, and gentlemen, beware. Soon there will be somebody on your left and on your right, and it will not be a male. So for some reason, and I'm really excited about it, we're going to see substantial numbers of women coming into the privacy field. They seem to fit, and indeed, as the executive director of the Privacy Foundation, next Friday we have a seminar on privacy data flows here at the University of Denver Law School. You can find us at privacy.org, and our panel now is all women. It's the first time, and they are all highly professional, working privacy lawyers in the field. So we are there, and be aware of that new contribution. For those of us at the Privacy Foundation, we continue to have seminars in the fall and the spring. The fall, we will probably do one on Apple's little discussion with the Department of Justice and the need for encryption. So it's another battle. But in each of these, we will constantly have the balance of individual rights, national security, individual privacy concerns, security concerns, because security and privacy always go hand in hand. So for all of you, as you look at security, Just remember, you have a privacy new kid on the block that's there in addition to death and taxes. Thank you.
Let's move on that. Okay, good. Okay, it's a great honor to be invited to tell UCCS cybersecurity research. And I will highlight 2 cybersecurity research projects, tell short story about NCIC Center and their mission and the facility that it's going to provide for us. The first project I'm going to talk about utilize intrusion tolerance paradigm. We all know that we're being attacked through the DDoS attack. And instead of pushback, traceback, we think about how to tolerate that by telling our customer coming through alternate gateway, maybe provided by Akamai, and they can come in at different kind of route. Just think about, you can set up this kind of route, 20 route. You can have, instead of 1 megabit bandwidth in the current internet, you can have 20 megabit kind of bandwidth coming to your site. So you provide better security, you solve DDoS problem. You can pick any of those 2 quality paths, send out duplicate kind of messages, provide better reliability, right? And then with those 20 geographic diverse paths, you are improve the performance. So this basically debunk the common myths where security always causes the overhead, right? So security research can do good thing. Second thing, let's talk about this new project. Terry just mentioned. We have a lot of serious problems, right? Target. More importantly, 4 million data breach, personal information got stolen by OPM, right? Everybody talk about that. So instead of just encrypt the data, what we still think further ahead, how about deliver the data to the right person, to the right time, to the right place, over the right route? That's one of the goals we are currently doing. So we call it R2D2, okay? Right place, right time. How do we do that? Let's say Chancellor Penn Shockley would like to send a sensitive message, maybe a board member kind of information, to governor. And the governor receives this link, click on it, the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth system in his office will then tell us, yeah, this is actually from governor's laptop. And therefore, we are deliver the R2D2 library to the government office. Right? And the other thing we are doing is modify and do a value-added software-defined network so that we can say the data is actually delivered through the port over the secure route to government office. That will give us additional capability. And last spring, UCCS hosts an Army Reserve workshop, private-public partnership workshop, with NSA and 8 schools chosen by the Army Reserve to work on the curriculum. And in that meeting, all the 8 universities, they all say, we need something that to enable our future cybersecurity research, which is NCIC also try to provide. The critical infrastructure need a CPS kind of lab. Most of the school doesn't have that kind of scale lab. At NCIC, hopefully that facility will share among the university and the industry provide this enabling capability. And finally, every first Friday of December, our students participate in ICTF organized by UC Santa Barbara. They are very passionate about that.
starting from 9 o'clock, they work, set up system, attack other university, defend their own system. And you say, they are so passionate about it. At 3 o'clock, you tell them they have a refreshment. They don't want to come. They work on it. And where is the passion come from? Because they got a realistic kind of example they can work on. So the NCIC is going to have the fast response team. They are going to go out, bring back from the small, medium-sized business, provide real example. We then can integrate into the curriculum and exercise to inspire their passion. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our fresh PhD, 5 days only. He just finished the defense, to talk about malware analysis. Jason.
All right, since we're running out of time, go ahead and roll the video. My name is Jason Upchurch. I work for Intel Corporation, that little thing inside your computer. I also run a actual real public-private partnership with the Air Force Academy at the Anti-Malware Lab. The project that I have been working on for 5.5 years is Malware Provenance, is similarity detection of malware blocks. So not two families, but actual code reuse in malware blocks. In 5.5 years, we've shown that we can be 48% more accurate than Carnegie Mellon, 4,000 times more faster at a million blocks, and that's about 5,000 searches per second. So what we could do with that is we can actually look at all blocks. There's 1.5 billion malware samples in the wild. We plan to be able to look at all blocks, all of it. And so we've also developed a visualization to actually understand relationships, allow for malware analysts to examine relationships, pull up why things are related, why things are important or not important. For instance, finding code reuse not in two families, but actually in two separate families. For instance, this 35 instruction exception handler that's found only in malware. So the accuracy is about 75% or so, which is almost twice as much as any other thing on the market that's been published. And we can explore full intrusion sets like this OPM set, or we could look at specific intrusions against all malware everywhere. So it has applications in threat intelligence, variant detection, and a number of other tools, and possibly even including active network defense or active host defense in drones. So that's it.
Good morning, everyone. Probably I should say good afternoon. Okay. I moved to Denver 2 years ago to join Regis. After I joined Regis, I learned two things. One is Regis founded 1874. Another thing is it's one of 27 Jesuit schools in the United States. I wish I could answer correct. Oops. Okay. Actually, I coordinating the graduate information assurance program at Regis. Now it's one part of the College of Computer and Information Sciences. It's one of newest college in Regis. Our program was designated by DHS and the NSA since 2007. In our program, actually we have a 300 to 400 students, and there's a large population of working professional, full-time working professional. And recent statistics shows we have like about 30% female student in our program. We have 4 programs in our I programs. 1 certificate program and 2 degree programs with concentration area like cybersecurity and policy management. In our program, the student may come from different industrial career. We have a large population of career changers. Student may come from the related area like computer science or system engineering, but also our student may come from business or like accounting or finance. or even come from real estate. I have a student, she have in real estate for 20 years. She said, called me, I want to change my career to cybersecurity. So in our course teaching, actually our faculty and also some students have some difficulty sometimes because everybody knows the cybersecurity exists in everywhere, from your life or every aspect of the networking or system. So actually in each of course, they have a prerequisite knowledge or skills. They may have a prerequisite as networking, database, or from all different areas. Sometimes the listed prerequisites as system courses like our system engineering course or the database courses. So currently, actually, I'm on a study of our curriculum. The past year, we spent a lot of time to study our old curriculum and work through our courses and try to update most of the courses. And actually, one question come to my mind. So is there a quick way we can push or help our career changers on the right track of cybersecurity easily and smoothly? So then actually we are doing this research to find out what is essential for the cybersecurity student, especially graduate student. They need to know before they can take advanced cybersecurity courses. And if we can cover it in one or very few prerequisite courses, that's good. If we can't, can we point them to right direction or right place to seek the quick answers? Okay, so here comes the one of course, at least on the slides, we are working on one of leveling course, 605. We want to put this one to cover most prep knowledges for the career changers. They can ready to on the right track. And also in this year, we are working on several new additions to our curriculum, like legal basics in cyber and information security. Actually, I'm very glad I met the co-designer in this meeting. So I will save my words because I don't want to be embarrassed because he's sitting here. Okay, and also we're working on the 3 another new courses, offensive cybersecurity and advanced forensics, because we have a network forensics and computer forensics already. So this is a new addition to our track of a forensics course. And one of the latest course we're still under development is malware analysis. I'm very glad Jason talked about malware, so we may invite him to give a talk in our future. I know everybody waiting for my finish because of lunch reason. Okay, thank you all. You got it.